You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome to another episode of Switched On Australia, where we explore the people, the places and ideas powering the country's energy transition. I'm Anne Delaney. Thanks for joining me. Today we're taking you to the vast plains of Hay in southwest New South Wales. Hay is one of the flattest regions in the Southern Hemisphere and also one of the most attractive locations in Australia for large-scale renewable energy development. With high voltage transmission lines cutting right through the region and wind developers lining up, Hay is on the cusp of enormous change. The New South Wales Government has designated it as a Renewable Energy Zone and recently allocated 4 major wind projects, although those developments won't be as large as initially hoped due to limited grid capacity. But the arrival of renewable energy isn't just about turbines and transmission towers. It's about people and the communities directly affected by the developments. That's what concerned Hay Shire Council most when renewable energy developers first came knocking back in 2021. They'd seen how other communities, even families, had been divided when renewables arrived. So they set out to stay ahead of the misinformation that can spread when people aren't fully informed and to empower their community to take part in the transition. The process they led not only brought the community along on the renewables journey, it helped shape a list of proposals that will deliver lasting benefits, including affordable energy for 30 years and new assisted living accommodation. My guest today is McLean, the Economic Development Manager at Hay Shire Council, who has helped guide this process. Ali, can you just describe the Hay region for me, where it is, how big an area it is, and what sort of industries sustain it?
Hay is located in southwestern New South Wales. If you draw a line between Sydney and Adelaide, we are right in the middle of that. We're a small community, 2,900 people. We're made up of a central service centre in the community of Hay, which is on the banks of the Murrumbidgee River, and then we have 2 smaller villages, Maud and Boolougal. The Hay region is known for its sheep, so merino sheep were bred just to the south of us here, and so we've traditionally been a very big livestock area. We still are, 66% still livestock. We have cropping as well, but we are a completely agrarian economy, and because of that we are very much at the whim of both the weather and markets.
Now, Hay has been identified as a suitable area for renewable development, large-scale renewable development. Tell me what makes it so suitable and what it could potentially mean for your local community.
So if anyone has ever driven across the Hay Plains, I should have mentioned that it is the flattest place in the Southern Hemisphere. And by flat, people tend to think that there's going to be an undulation or some trees, and that is not the case. It is literally just flat, and there are no trees. We have a perennial plant called a saltbush, which is really the basis of our existence to a degree. So we're very, very flat. Our topography lends itself to wind developments in particular. We often joke that if you've ever stood in a set of sheep yards on a windy September day, you can fully understand why they thought this would be a good place to have renewable energy development. So the topography really suits, but we're also very sparsely populated. So our farming community, our primary production is large-scale commodity farming, and because of that we have very large holdings when we're talking about both family-owned and corporate-owned primary production. So when people often talk about renewable developments, they're thinking about areas that have lifestyle blocks and hobby farms where you're talking to upwards of 30 neighbours and landholders. In our situation here, we're actually talking about, 5 or 6 landholders as part of that conversation. And strangely, and I have learnt this over the past 4 years, it's much easier to hide a wind turbine on a very flat hay plain than it is to hide a turbine in hilly country.
Oh, that's interesting. I
Yeah,
did not know that.
yeah. So when you're driving out here, you can see the horizon for sort of 10, 15 kilometres ahead of you, but you're also going past that horizon. You're going into that quite quickly as well because we're all on highways. So to pass a major development like that actually happens very quickly. So it is actually less of a visual impact than it is in a mountainous region where you're continually seeing one turbine after the next.
You're also linked quite closely to the high voltage transmission lines between South Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales, aren't you? Which makes you a great site for renewable developers.
Oh, absolutely. So when this area was marked as the Southwest Renewable Energy Zone, which is the framework under which New South Wales operates to develop renewables, one of the key criteria was really that we had the backbone of Project Energy Connect going straight through the region, and that proximity to the transmission line and those other factors that I talked about, that makes us an ideal area for it. But without Project Energy Connect, without those transmission lines, this would not be happening.
So take me back to 2022 when some of the renewable developers came knocking on doors in the Hay Shire. Just describe your initial reaction when you first heard about the renewable energy projects potentially coming to Hay.
I think the best way to sum it up was really just a sense of confusion. We had, and it was earlier than that. Actually, it was about 2021 where we started to, at local government, we're privileged to hear information before the community does, and we had started to hear about this thing called a Southwest Renewable Energy Zone. Then we had developers who were actually coming into the area and starting to talk to landholders. Then landholders were calling me and saying, is this legit? We've got these developers coming here. Then we had the developers coming to council and asking for development application on met mass, which was part of their planning process. So there was a lot of confusion in that space within the community, and anyone who lives in a small rural area like we do knows that the grapevine will beat any sort of social media, any sort of communication. And so the grapevine was starting to arc up a bit, and we really felt like that conversation was sort of running away from us as to what is actually going on here and who has actually got the reins of this.
Was there a lot of misinformation on that grapevine because people were confused about what was happening?
At that point, not yet. So the conversations were kept pretty tightly because obviously for landholders, they're having financial conversations with the developers. We're part of a planning process and a planning instrument because we are local government, so we're aware of that sort of process that was happening. But there was starting to be a groundswell of conversation around renewables are coming to Hay, what's actually happening. And that's where we thought, well, we need to jump in here quickly because we know how that grapevine works. And the minute that misinformation gets out, and in particular the minute that the loud minority gets a hold of a conversation in this community, it can be the death of that conversation. It can be an absolute killer in terms of the community being able to have a conversation about that. And I've seen that in other issues where, because we are small and we value our relationships, there aren't that many other people to choose from. We will tend to shy away from confrontation. And so you can see that when those loud voices get a hold of a topic, the rest of the community will shy away from that. And then that becomes the truth. So whatever is being said out loud and at the loudest, that becomes the truth. And I was very concerned about that happening because I had friends in the other reses who described to me the breakdown of family relationships, division within communities, because nothing had happened at that very early stage to stop that misinformation from running riot.
So you were trying to get ahead of the misinformation before it took root within the community, essentially.
I really wanted the community, I wanted there to be an open discussion. It wasn't about making people choose a side. And I wanted people to be informed in that discussion because I knew the misinformation that was out there, and some of it was, eye rolling sort of information that would be quoted back. And I think our community, we're a very resilient community, and I think given what we'd been through a drought, we've been through a flood. We knew the impacts of what was happening in that broader sort of conversation around the climate, and I saw this as a real opportunity, obviously, but I wanted the community to have discussion and not division. I didn't want to see the community, split in half because people had put their flags in the ground about whether they thought climate change was real or not. And in fact, what I thought was a more important conversation was about this opportunity that was being presented to us. So I didn't want people to have to choose a side. It was really about, do we want this for Hay?
How difficult was that, though, to balance, your concerns about the potential disruption to the community with your clear recognition of the significant economic opportunities presented by renewables? And just to underline, you are the economic manager for the council.
Well, it's my job to look at this. One of my jobs is to attract investment to the region, and gosh, in terms of a KPI, this was a massive tick. So that was good. But no, from a community point of view, to be able to get people or give people the opportunity to have that education and to have that discussion, I really thought that there would be another local government who had done this, and I started. Because in local government, there's a lot of copying and pasting. You ring a colleague in another LGA and say, what have you done? That's a local government area. You ring someone at another council and say, can you share that with me? And we do. Generally, we're very generous with our work.
Well, it's a cost saving, isn't it?
It's an absolute cost saving. But also someone's been through the pitfalls and they know how it works. So why reinvent the wheel? But I could not find another area that had done that because this RES conversation was happening. It was so dynamic and things were changing at such a rapid pace that it was really hard for local government to find out what our role was, but also what was the response, what was the community response to what was happening to us. So I was looking for support to be able to do this. This is not something that in my role at council I couldn't deliver the information that I felt needed to be delivered because I am a community member. I needed someone who had the expertise to be able to deliver what is a very contentious and emotional conversation with respect, but also with the knowledge to be able to back it up. So I was on the hunt, and
it was a chance meeting, I understand, that helped you find a way forward.
It was very serendipitous. So Kate Hook, who at that stage worked for Realliance, had broken down in Hay, and she'd been here for 3 days with her children. My office is at the back of the Visitor Information Centre. When I was leaving work that afternoon, I actually ran into her in the car park, and we started talking. I was talking about, what do you actually do? And I said, I have this. I've got a problem. I really need some help. What do you think I could do? And then Kate, on her drive home to Orange, started to think about what the opportunity could be to really take a community on a journey. I hate that expression, but it really was about taking a community on a journey. And so with Andy Bray, who is the head of Realliance, and Kate, we took these tentative steps into delivering this process. I don't think we knew what we were doing. Not that we didn't know what we were doing, but we didn't realise the significance of what we were doing.
How groundbreaking it probably was. Yeah. So what did you come up with? What was the way forward for your community?
At the very heart of it, it was about education and information. So Andy and Kate developed a really strategic and considerate program for the community. So first of all, for our councillors, who were very brave in taking this on and really being at the forefront of the conversation for the community. So really taking it to the community. So we did a workshop with the councillors. I think it was about 3 hours where we talked about the facts, why this is happening, why in Hay, what it could potentially look like, what we feared, what we thought would be great. A very honest conversation with our councillors, and that was really important because in a small community like this, councillors will get those conversations in the supermarket, on the sidelines at sport on a Saturday, in their businesses. You know, there's no delineation. You are a councillor all the time. There's no kind of clocking off. So we thought it was really important to give our councillors that information, because what we really wanted to do was to get a position for the community. We didn't have a decision about what that position was, but we wanted to present this opportunity that was coming our way, knowing that this was going to happen. And it was at that point that we started to say, so this can either happen to us or it can happen with us. And as I mentioned before, we're quite an isolated town. We are very resilient. We tend to just get on with the getting on, and we solve problems ourselves because of it. So I knew that for our community it would be, well, we don't want to be on the sidelines screaming. We want to be at the table having the conversation.
And when you say you wanted a position, was that as broad as whether or not you're in favour, the council is in favour of some of these developments, or was it something you weren't even sure of when you started this process?
The conversation was not about whether we were in favour or not of the developments. The conversation was, these developments are going to happen. This has been mandated and legislated by the New South Wales government. This is going to happen, and there is an opportunity for us to control this conversation and be right at the centre of it, or this can just go right over the top of us, and that will be a much worse outcome for our community. So what is the position that we're going to take? We're either going to take a very forward position where it is, we will be part of it, we want to be part of the conversations, we will tell you what the community wants to see, these are the conditions on which you come into our community. It was like a rules of engagement, I suppose. And that was the position that we were looking for. So it was really about taking control of what this looked like for our community.
And at this stage, there were no developers that had put their proposals in?
So they'd already started to do planning processes. So in New South Wales, the planning process runs concurrently with what is a competitive access scheme. So it's very different to other states where the capacity that is in the transmission lines was part of a competitive process. So we had 9 developers in Hay alone who were looking to bid in to get the rights to have access, and that process has only just been completed in the last month.
We'll go on to that a little bit later, but just tell me about some of the workshops that you organised for the community and some of the initial community reaction in those workshops.
So the next stage that we did after we'd spoken to the councillors is we actually pulled together a group of people who at the time we coined thought leaders. I think it was a bingo word going around. But they really are the people who have influence within the social infrastructure of our community, and anyone will know who those people are. So they're not necessarily elected leaders, but they are the leaders of a community, and they are the people who the rest of the community turns to for advice, for decision making, for leadership in that sort of informal economy that operates so importantly in these small rural communities. So we pulled together 12 of those people, and they were across all sorts of demographics. So men, women, different stages of life, different stages of education, landholders, people who lived in town, people who have moved to town, people who've been here their whole lives, a real cross section. And we brought them into a room, and for 4 hours we spoke about everything and anything to do with renewable energy and renewable energy development, with the aim of it being, again, to get a position from the community. So it wasn't about forcing a decision or forcing people to put their flags on either side. It was about presenting this conversation around, is this an opportunity for our community? Is this something that we are going to really go for?
You focused on the economic benefits for your community, essentially.
We focused on economic benefits because, again, in New South Wales, which is different to the other states, there are mandated community benefits that flow from these projects. So there was a quantum that we were working with at that point, but it was a little bit more than just the financial gain. It was about the programs and projects that would come with these developments that would deliver benefit to the community as well. An example would be helping businesses to be able to develop the skills to bid into these construction projects, not necessarily the ones now, but perhaps in 10 years' time, delivering that sort of program. So we knew that there would be all of these other additional benefits that would come from these energy developments. And really, at the end of that 4-hour session, we said to the community, so is this an opportunity that we want to take? And a quote that I often use, one of the participants in that group said, and he was, president of the local AFL club, he's a landholder, he has lots of connections in the community, and he just said, I don't want this. I don't want to have wind turbines all over the Hay Plains, but I tell you what, if this is an opportunity for our community, then let's go for it. And that, to me, was success, because
Yes.
it wasn't about making people, declare their ideology. It was really just about what is best for this community. So it really was putting community at the heart of the conversation.
So do you think that putting community at the heart of the conversation, that's what helped break down some of the initial scepticism?
I think it was two things. One, it was about presenting facts. So another thing that happened in that session that was fascinating was a conversation from a woman who was sitting in the session, who born and bred in Hay, and she quoted back that, you know what, farmers don't want this. I saw it on Sky, and farmers do not want this. And she was sitting next to a landholder who was potentially going to be a host, and he said, this is the greatest thing that will ever happen to my family if this comes off. This will mean that I won't have to worry as much about drought. This means that I will get to make really good business decisions that impact on this town. This means that I'll be able to keep people employed when we go into that inevitable drought that's just down the road. And that conversation was like light bulbs going across the whole room, because it was, here is a piece of information that I have received from the mainstream media. Now I'm talking to the person who they were actually talking about, and I'm being told a very different story. And so it was those conversations within that group that were really enlightening. And then I think it was that that group of people were treated with all of the information that we had at hand. So it was about saying, you guys are grown up enough and smart enough to digest this information and make your own decisions. I'm not going to come here and ram it down your throat.
But it also raises that crucial issue of the benefits that can go to the landowners but not to the community. But by putting that focus on community needs and what the community themselves come up with, it broadens out the benefits, doesn't it? That it's not just the landowners, which can split the community.
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, the New South Wales framework for how the renewables have been developed in these reses has been quite beneficial in having those conversations, because we were able to go to the community and say there will be a financial gain for the whole community. And we've also been able to negotiate affordable energy from the developers. We're looking at legacy projects as well. So we were able to present that. That's a very different conversation to what happens in other states. Because it is often just about these landholders becoming enormously rich from the benefits of wind turbines. I say that with jest. And I think what was really interesting in that conversation was that the landholder was saying, this is not going to make me a millionaire, but it certainly takes the pressure off. And because we are an agrarian economy, everyone in that room understands that the minute it gets dry, and we've headed into a bit of a dry spell now, the wallets just get closed up. Economic activity really starts to slow down. So everyone understands that at a very personal level. For us to be able to say, here is an industry that will protect us or diversify us from those dry and now flooding periods. And I think what's really interesting for a community of our size, there's often a conversation around, well, what's the operation? When they get to the operational stage, what kind of a benefit is that to the community? For a community of our size, to have 30 additional workers is really, really significant. That presents a sort of generational change to have that long-term workforce of 30 additional people in our community. Outside of that construction sugar hit, which we were very, very frank about. There's a sugar hit, there's a chance that, this could pass us by if we don't really get involved in this conversation now. But that operational phase is something that will be of great benefit to our community.
The discussions that you started to have were going beyond just renewables. I mean, it really unearthed some critical issues, didn't it, about what the community needs, and that got rolled into the ask that you have now of developers. Tell me about that, how that emerged.
One of the interesting things for our community, because we are quite small and we are, reliant on agriculture, is that we've always existed in this sort of 2-year time frame. So big projects and big legacy that we would love to be able to deliver. We never had the financial surety to be able to do that. As a local government, as boring as this sounds, we've got a very low rate base. It's really hard for us to deliver just our normal services. And then we were very reliant on that, the grant cycle. A new government would come in, they'd come up with a new program, you'd try and get a project up, it'd be sort of over and done with, in 2 years' time. So that forward planning that we've sort of never entertained because we knew it wasn't reality. All of a sudden, having this opportunity with the renewables meant that we were, as a community, able to lift our gaze and really think about what we wanted to see, with the potential of it becoming a reality. And it was interesting to see the community grow as we've been through this process. So we've been doing community consultation now for nearly 3 years as we go through all of this planning. One of the other propositions that we gave to the community is, this is coming, this is a great opportunity, but you just can't say to the developers, well, we'd like housing fixed. We've got to put the hard yards in now and look at what that looks like for our community. So we have been doing it, and it has been like a marathon, but the community's really started to muscle up and coming up with really innovative and great responses to what we would like to see happen. And because we've got such community support for it, we're also feeling quite empowered. So we have gone to the developers and said, this is what we want to see around that housing piece. This is what we want to see when it comes to education. We just don't want a couple of scholarships. That's not good enough for us. What we'd like to see is investment in our TAFE, investment in our country university centre. We want to be able to see this become a centre of excellence for renewable training.
Are you giving them dollar figures? Are you saying we want this amount of money for whatever it is, for your TAFE, for whatever?
Well, that's mandated by the government, how much money we can expect from the developers. But we've certainly said to them, and this is where we would like to see this proportion of the money go towards. And I should preface that by saying that we, at this stage, we are still in that negotiation process because we've only just had the announcements made with the developers. But it's been really great to see the community grow and actually want to be involved in the conversations. And for anyone who's been involved with community consultation, they will know that it is so hard to get people involved in those conversations because they often go nowhere. And it's really hard to ask people to take time out of extremely busy lives to be involved in conversations that sometimes it's really hard to see what the end goal is when you're working your way through a process. But the community have really started to get involved in this because they can see that there is going to be a result from this, and there is an opportunity now for us to make those generational changes that we've never been able to do before.
So would you say that the understanding that the renewables could help solve the community's existing problems was a turning point for the community?
If you go back to that quote that I gave from the community member, that was really the nexus of it. I don't really want this. I don't really want this industry here, but this is a great opportunity for our community. So yes, it did change that conversation, and we have never had we've never been able to diversify our economy because we are a long way from markets. We are really quite an isolated area, but now because of our location and because we would be hosting renewable energy developments, we now became a really attractive place to do business and to invest. And that was an absolute step change for our community. Prior to that, we'd always been just grateful. Oh, we'd be so grateful if someone turned up and looked at us, somewhere to do business, or so grateful if someone expanded. And now that has sort of changed a bit where we're saying, well, no, you actually should be very grateful that you're here. And yes, you will have a conversation with you, but, we're quite popular at the moment. So that in itself builds confidence within the community. And I think what's been very interesting going through this process is that the community has gained confidence that they've got the knowledge to respond. So our community feels empowered enough to go out and say, actually, this will be great for Hay. And they can do it with confidence. And some of the feedback that we got from when we went the next stage after that was to go and do town halls. And some of the feedback that we got from that was, well, thank God someone's got our back on this. That's great. Yep, okay, that's fantastic. So I don't have to worry about it as Joe Public, but someone else has got my back, and I will contribute where necessary, but it's not something that I have to stay awake worrying about of a night time.
So, how have the renewable developers responded to what the community has asked of them?
From the very beginning, when they came here, they were enormously respectful of our community, and the community really appreciated that. And they consulted the community really genuinely, and they were very transparent about what the impacts would be for a community of this size. The converse of that is that they were also really open to the conversations about what the community wanted to see from those community benefits. Some of the developers were so innovative in the ways that they developed those community benefit schemes, and all of them really took on board the information that we had from the community that ended up in the document that's called the principles. It was so good to see that from the developers because we had heard from other areas and other states that there was a feeling of the developers just ticking a box. But we felt that the community, I think, would attest to this as well, that the consultation that happened and the result of that, which was the community benefit programs that were developed or proposed, really did reflect Hay. So it wasn't a cookie cutter approach. It really did reflect what the community wanted to see. And I don't think it'd be a surprise for anyone to know that when we did the community sessions, the first thing that everyone wanted was free energy, actually. But we thought, well, knowing what Hay's like, there would just be air conditioners going for 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. So that was a little bit, we didn't want to see that behaviour encouraged. So we went down the path of affordable energy. And affordable energy, all of the developers who had gentailers, who had retail arms, came to the party on that. And for those that didn't, they designed other schemes that would help us to reduce our electricity bills as a whole community. And that's a great outcome that we were able to negotiate because we'd done this work with the community, and it really was the voice of the community saying that.
Because in many rural communities, opposition to renewables development can be pretty high. This process that you've gone through, where you have presented what the community wants to the developers, rather than the developers saying, we'll give you some footy jerseys, etc., and a couple of grants, surely that makes things so much clearer about what is going to pass between, and I would guess the renewable developers should be happy with that, even though they may have to pay more, so to speak.
The developers, I think, were very surprised at the unity of Hay in terms of our response to the opportunity, to the energy transition. But it is a very place-based response, I should say. We are one town in the LGA essentially, and it is much easier to wrap your arms around one community in one geographic location and get some unity than it is for those other areas who have multiple towns and villages who all have their own unique ideas about what should happen in terms of community benefit. So, I think we did it. This was great. This process was fantastic for our community, but it is very particular to this region. But the developers recognised that. In fact, when they first started to do their community consultation, because they were required to do that as part of the process, they were just surprised because they said, normally we go into these with flak jackets on, and we're just not experiencing that at all. People are really welcoming, and they say this is going to be great for our town, and I hope you get up. So they found that very different. But I think because of it, they were much more open to the ideas of developing these community benefit funds and programs with the community. So they weren't trying to combat and therefore perhaps make decisions that quieten down that voice. They were really like, well, let's think really differently about how we do this. Here's a community that's going to embrace renewables. We could do some really different things, because they weren't resourcing and putting their energy into trying to stop the anger and the noise. And that is a really genuine feeling from the community, anger and fear. It's a massive change that we're about to undergo. But they didn't get that in Hay, and it is because we are quite a unique community in that we are isolated, that we do have a sparse population, that we're probably just a tiny bit more exposed in terms of the economic impacts of drought and flood, and because of the size of our holdings. So all of those variables came together to create this almost perfect storm of, here's a really good opportunity in this small place where we could do something really different.
So where are things at now? You said that all the developers have agreed to provide affordable energy if the projects go ahead. Where is the principals document and the communities ask what they want for the community? Where's all of that at now?
So the access bids, the access scheme that has been announced by Energy Co. Those announcements were made at the end of April, and we have 4 developments across the whole of the Southwest Renewable Energy Zone. So there are 2 further to our east at locations called near Colliambly and Jerilderie, and then there are 2 developments that share a footprint with our neighbouring council, Edward River Council, and our council in Hay. So that's Sameva AGL with Pottinger Wind Farm, and Bayvar with Bulwar Wind Farm. And so we now go into a phase of really bedding down what had been proposed in their access bids. We have developed a really good relationship with the developers, knowing that this was a relationship that was going to go on for 30 years. So it was a little bit of start as you mean to proceed, and the developers have been appreciative of that as well. But now is really when the rubber hits the road, where we start to look at those negotiations, because neither of those projects were actually granted the full capacity that they had bid in for. So that sort of changes the quantum that we were talking about originally. But that is something that we're looking forward to getting our teeth into.
And so, in terms of actually bedding down what the community is going to get, that the negotiations will be done through council.
There's a number of ways that can happen. So obviously there will be payments to landholders and neighbours. We have no visual on that. That's not something that we're privy to, that information. Then there are what are traditionally called voluntary planning agreements, which is interesting because they're not voluntary. But those planning agreements is the way that the New South Wales Planning Department have suggested is a good way for the funding to come into the community. And that's really because local government is, generally stable, has good governance and financial legislation around that. But the developers also have the ability to run their own community fund. So that has generally been a smaller fund, and that's where we're talking about that sort of ongoing sponsorship, the smaller funding that goes towards the footy shirts and the golden boots, as we like to call them, which are still really important. But what we have said as a community is we want to see that money that's coming into this community really used to amplify our wishes into the future. And so looking at this as a 30-year time frame where you have that funding coming in for 30 years, that's very different for our community. And we've done a lot of work to make sure that we've got some really good plans in place, including bringing in young people. So we're talking to 16, 17 and 18-year-olds, because they will be the ones who are dealing, with these projects, and with those funds into the future. So it's a really long-term view that we've taken, and that's probably something that we've never had the privilege to do before. There's also another bucket of money that becomes available to the community through an access scheme. So all of the developers pay an amount of money to the government through Energy Co, and that money is then delivered back into each of the LGAs within the Southwest Res. So that program is yet to be finalised and designed, but that again is money that we are able to use towards this sort of wish list that we've developed. But one of the things that our community has been very firm on is that we don't want to see any sort of division come out of that money coming into the community, that we want to see all of that money pulled together to be able to deliver big generational change.
What else is on your wish list other than affordable energy?
Oh, it's such a long wish list. So, I mean, it's the three chestnuts that any community, both urban or rural, I would suggest, really face, and that is housing, childcare, and education, particularly challenging for us in rural areas. So, we're looking at developing a work camp in Hay that would be used by the developers, that would then be repurposed into assisted or independent living. That's not a facility that we have in Hay at the moment. And if we pull that lever, that has an impact on so many other systems and issues within our community. So that means, if we're able to provide that sort of legacy project, that frees up housing for families to be able to move in, that frees up the rental market. It just does it answers so many of the questions that we have, or so many of the problems that we have. We're really interested in looking at long-term educational outcomes for our community. It's very challenging for young students and mature age students to gain education because of where we are, be that TAFE or through university. So that's certainly something that we're tackling now, and we look forward to working with the developers on delivering those outcomes as well. We're looking at how do we reduce that energy burden on households? So we're looking at affordable energy, but we're also talking about battery energy storage systems at both a community level, but also at the individual household level. We're talking about projects in terms of investment. One of the great outcomes of this for our region, and for Hay in particular, is that we will be able to attract capital to this region and investment from businesses, because we are hosting renewable energy development. So to be able to do that, to be able to say, we are a renewable energy area and we do host and we gladly host, that really changes the conversation for those energy hungry industries, and be that anything from value add ag down to data processing centres. It really does change how that investment looks for businesses and for organisations looking to do that. And it also changes the way that people view hay. I mean, people tend to think that we're a bunch of hicks out here just following sheep around, but this response has been a really educated response to, here is an opportunity and we'll embrace it as a community, and we will host large scale industry that will change how Australia operates. So yeah, what a great place to invest. You should come and speak to us. That does change that perception of us, and that's another really important benefit that I think often gets left to the side of the conversations, but it's something that's really important to our community.
Ali, how important do you think that the role of local government is in navigating these relationships with the renewable developers? And do you think that most councils are equipped to play the role?
I think whether we like it or not, local government is the lead agency in many of these areas. And we are the first port of call for everything. And there is an expectation that council has the resourcing and the skills to be able to respond to this. There's an expectation from the community and from developers and the state government, and that is not always true. I mean, we are very small councils generally dealing with really broad issues, trying to be sometimes all things to all people, but the expectation is genuinely there from the community, and so it should. I mean, local government is here to represent the community at the very heart of the conversation. Are we resourced to do it? No, not if you look at business as usual. This is something that is very unusual for us, and really the impact for a community like Hay hosting a renewable energy development is exactly the same impact for a community like Dubbo hosting an energy development. But Dubbo has a lot more scope to be able to deal with that impact, just because of the sheer number of population, the number of businesses, the number of options around accommodation, water, all of those sorts of that sort of service that comes with hosting a development of this size. Those larger areas have a much better ability to take that impact than we do. So it is very challenging for local government to get into this conversation. But every local government has this at their feet now. So we are both we are part of that planning process. We are part of the community consultation process. We are part of the delivery of the funding for the next 30 years. Local council is involved in every single aspect of this transition. We'll be the ones who'll be talking about, roads that are damaged because there's been so many truck movements. We'll be the ones who are, talking about there's no accommodation because all of the FIFOs have taken up hotel rooms. So that the response is expected to be very local, yet I'm not sure that we have been resourced to be able to do that at this stage. But as I said, it's a very dynamic space. The conversations that we started with in 2021 don't even look familiar now, because it changes at such a pace, and information that becomes available is so different to what it was 3 years ago. So we have to keep evolving. We don't really have a choice, but sometimes it does feel a little bit overwhelming, I'd have to say.
Just a final question, Ali. What is the one main piece of advice you'd give to other regional or rural councils navigating similar situations with large-scale renewable energy developments?
I'd say that respecting your community's ability to understand complex information is really undervalued. And doing that for our community, it really did change how we approached this as a community, because people are willing to take in that information and make those decisions themselves. But what happens if you don't do that is the decisions get made for them, And that's where people get angry, and they feel resentment, and they feel like they have no voice in that conversation. And it happens to us all the time in rural communities. There are decisions made at much higher levels. We have no voice in those decisions, and it's hard not to feel left out. So I think for other rural communities going through this, and other rural and regional councils, it really is about saying, here is all the information, and we respect you enough to make a good decision for your community. And what has been so impressive about Hay, although we have some runs on the board about this, it really has been about what is best for our community. So the individual has taken themselves out of that, whether they want climate change, believe in climate change. That really has come out of it, and it really is about, well, here's a big opportunity, so as a community, let's go for it. But I think that comes back to the respect of giving people enough information to make informed decisions and feel empowered in that conversation, which all sounds very motherhoody, I'd have to say, Anne, having said that. But it is really about...
That makes sense.
Yeah, it really is about saying, local government, we are very privileged to receive a lot of information, and I think us sharing that with the community has given a level of respect for the process.
McLean, thank you so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
That is great. Thank you so much.
And McLean is the Economic Development Manager at Hay Shire Council. And we'll keep you posted on how the renewable developments unfold for the Hay community. That's it for this week. If you like what we do here at Switched On, please give us a like or a comment and recommend us to all your friends. It all helps spread the word about how the energy transition is impacting consumers and communities. I'm Anne Delaney. See you next time.